I've seen the people joining us is slowing down, so we'll get underway here. And just give me a moment. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Jim Randolph. I'm the Executive Director for the Illinois Ready Mix Concrete Association. And we've been hosting this 12 webinar series over the last several months. And we just want to say welcome, and we're really glad to have you. Just a couple of things to go over today. This webinar today, number 12, is about the new concrete industry promotion on concrete trails. Just a few opening comments. We do have listed on our website at www.irmca.org our antitrust statement. It's available there. We want to refrain from any discussion relative to pricing or trade secrets, anything in a competitive nature. So you can look at that entire statement if you go to our website, but that's basically what it says. If there are any uninvited guests or media on this webinar, we ask that you would please leave the meeting now. We are recording, and these webinars are being archived at our website. If you'll go on our homepage, top right corner, it says webinars, a blue box. That takes you to all of our webinars, and it takes you to each one has their title. You can go back as this is being recorded and see all of them. At your Zoom toolbar below, you have a question and answer button. We invite you to ask questions throughout the webinar, and at the end, we'll get the answers to John for him to answer those for you. We are very grateful for our sponsors that help us with these webinar series, and we want to recognize them. And we also want to invite you again on our website under the webinars tab to go to each one of these sponsors. They have up to 3 links of specific items of interest to their company, to you, and this webinar series. So they're providing additional information. Please visit them as well. We're going to mention today that this webinar is in memory of Theron Tobalski, the Assistant Executive Director of the Illinois Ready Mix Concrete Association, who recently passed away on June 18th, 2021. Good friend and co-worker and partner here at IRMCA. Theron was a champion for the concrete industry whose work and promotion efforts impacted our industry in Illinois and nationwide. Theron put this 12 webinar series together, and he hosted each one. We will miss him, but we will cherish his accomplishments and legacy for the ready mix concrete industry that will live on for years to come. Today's presentation is new concrete industry promotion on concrete trails. One side note that's exciting is that as we recognize our new funding sources from our capital bill in 2019 and our motor fuel taxes that are growing, and they will continue to grow as they've been indexed each year, our governor has, the Rebuild Illinois program is allocating funds. It's going to be specific to hiking trails and bike trails and concrete trails. So this is very timely. So I encourage you in your municipalities to be talking to your government officials and see where you can pull funding to enhance your trails in your section. I have a good friend in Des Moines, Iowa. His name is John Hansen. He's the Senior Vice President of Local Paving. He has an immense background in concrete, and he is with the National Ready Mix Concrete Association. John, welcome. We're so glad to have you. The webinar is yours, sir.
Thank you, Jim. Let me switch this screen real quick and make the transition.
You're good to go.
Good to go. Well, it is my pleasure to be back working with the folks in Illinois. I had Illinois in my region when I first came on board with NRMCA and built some great relationships there. And when I get a chance to take a look at who attended today, I'm sure there's going to be some familiar faces. Today, we're going to talk about concrete trail design, and the webinar will be based on what's in the recently released, and it's into a second year now, the Guide to Concrete Trails. It's a kind of a primer today to get you to take a look at that document and see what's in there and use it. It is designed to be a document from square one. You know, there are different parts of the country that are more mature in their trail design. There are different parts that are just getting started. So as we put this trail guide together, we took the approach of let's get people off to the start on the right foot, and then we'll come back in probably 4 or 5 years and do a second edition of it, like we are doing currently with the Guide to Concrete Overlays of Asphalt Parking Lots, which will be released in September of this coming year. Now, here we go. As Jim mentioned, I do cover parts of the southwestern United States now for our Pave Ahead team. I'm not working currently in the Midwest, even though I'm still living here. But I asked for and got the southwestern part of the United States and California a couple of years back because I was developing such good relationships through the years with contractors and producers in that area. I looked at this today as I got it ready, and I thought 48 years in the construction industry, my goodness, I'm almost ashamed to put that up there anymore, but as you can tell, that's a lifetime commitment to the concrete construction industry and construction in general. 16 of those years now have been with the National Ready Mix Concrete Association on what was first the the National Resource Directors team, and now we've divided it into, of course, paving and buildings, and I'm part of that paving team. I'm happy to tell you that just as a kind of an FYI, it was my idea to bring that Guide to Concrete Overlays of Asphalt Parking Lots to the industry. This was a culmination of many conversations with another Illinoisan that you all know, Randy Riley, and sharing information back and forth on doing overlays of asphalt parking lots, along with Gordon Smith. And these guys are really the pioneers in that. Brought that to market in 2012, and we're in the process of bringing out an updated version in September this year. Once we got that done and we found the success, I was able to promote and pitch the idea of we need to do a guide to concrete trails. And so we put that together and released that document after it going through the due diligences of the funding mechanism. A little bit about NRMCA. We're a trade association that was established in 1930. We're based in Alexandria, Virginia. We represent over 1,400 companies, member companies across the United States. That represents 75% of all the production of concrete in the United States. We have many different operations that are involved in NRMCA: compliance and operation, engineering, government affairs, local paving, which is the Pave Ahead initiative. And one of the newest ones is the structures and sustainability, which is Build with Strength. Those are all NRMCA initiatives. So let's talk about what we're going to cover in today's time that we have together. And again, we're going to really focus on the Guide to Concrete Trails manual. At the towards the end of this, we're going to show you where you can download a free copy of that document. There are printed copies available at a very reasonable cost. They're $12 a copy plus the shipping. And you might guess at $12 a copy, that just covers our printing cost on doing a hard copy. We've been kind of surprised in this day of electronic copies of everything that a lot of people will download the PDF, which is free, but then they want that hard copy. And as we get around to job sites, we find this hard copy laying on the dash of the pickup trucks and as a reference guide. And so we're going to commit to always providing printed copies for those who like to use those, take them out, and don't always have the ability to pull up an electronic copy of something on a job site. We're gonna hit on 4 kind of main topics of this, and one of the things you may not consider seeing in a concrete guide is we're going to look at the various funding mechanisms, because as Jim alluded to, the new one that came out in Illinois, funding for trails, for recreational trails in general, has been around for a long time. And so we'll give you a brief background on trail funding mechanisms. And then we're going to talk about how to determine concrete thickness for various trail types. I'll get into why we put the thickness part in there because of some things we found that we needed to clarify in other documents. We're going to look at construction techniques and equipment that has been used for concrete trail placement. I'm here to tell you that I believe that we're in the infancy of the equipment that's out there. You'll see some of the things that have actually been built by contractors or municipalities and some of the large manufacturers, but I believe that as we sit here today that we will see development of more and diverse trail, concrete trail building equipment in the years to come. And then we're going to look at which details and specification criteria are especially important for these projects. And when you get done with this, I hope you say like I do, boy, it's really quite simple. We don't try and complicate this. The design and the construction are really quite simple. We're going to have available download PDF versions of the Guide to Concrete Trails and a copy of this webinar. Jim will have those posted on the website. If you would like a printed copy, I'm not sure of what the inventory situation is in Illinois for getting printed copies, but please get a hold of Jim if you would like to get a printed copy. I have printed copies on hand. I can get them to him in short order. And then, of course, as he mentioned, if you've got some questions, type them into that chat box as we move forward. I do want to tell you that the Guide to Concrete Trails was produced by the National Concrete Pavement Technology Center. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the National CP Tech Center, it is a concrete paving research center that's based at Iowa State University. I don't want you to get hung up on Iowa State University. I get people all over the country say, well, that's that Iowa document. No. That is the National Concrete Pavement Technology document. Much like the concrete industry has their National Research Center, and it's based at Iowa State University, which there were other universities in the running for that when it was designated. I was part of the Iowa group that monitored that when it was being designated. The asphalt industry has their National Research Center at Auburn University. So we don't need to get hung up on it being a Midwest document. It is an industry document. The reason we went to the CP Tech Center to write this document is that they are the recognized industry experts in all types of slab-on-grade paving. And of course, if you're going to have something written for the industry, why would you not go to the recognized resource? This was a collaborative effort. That the funding, though, for this came from the Ready Mix Concrete Research and Education Foundation. So if any of you are here today and you contribute to the RMC Foundation, Education Foundation, this is where your money's going. This is what it's being used to do. And the goal of putting this together and writing it and bringing it to market was to deliver it at no cost. And that is why you can download PDFs free. That's why that we sell the printed books at cost, at printing cost. This is not an effort to raise money selling books. It's an effort to bring information to the industry. So why did we develop this Guide to Concrete Trails? Well, it comes down to this. We did some research and there was no standardized design and construction document that addressed concrete trail construction. Now, we found 3 really good documents on asphalt trail construction, and then they would put a sidebar in there, and not specifically written by the asphalt industry, but by other trail designers. They would put a sidebar in that concrete can be used for trail construction, and they would talk about the thicknesses that had to be used, and they would mimic road design specifications and rebar. They were basically that same obstacle we run across all the time that we find when someone else writes our information for us. They over design it. And so we decided we needed to have a industry document that addressed the right practice of moving forward of building concrete hard surface recreational trails. Now, what's happened in the last 20 years, 30 years, and Jim mentioned the Des Moines area, it's assumed almost that when someone has a development, that there will be an access trail of some kind within these developments. They have become a public utility that people expect within a community. And there's different funding sources that can be used depending on if that trail is in a private development as part of the development amenities, or if it goes out into the public right-of-way or roadways, and we're going to touch on those in just a little bit. But standalone trail funding is always available, and if you have someone who's a good researcher and knows how to go after grant money, money is out there to build hard surface trails. And again, I'm going to tell you I'm separating that term hard surface trails from concrete trails or unpaved recreational trails. You have to really decide what type of trail you're going to build and develop as you move forward. Right now, I'm in the process of working with a county that has 34 miles of developed trail. They are compacted limestone trails, and we're working on hard surfacing those. And of course, we're talking about doing those in concrete. So we need to understand the terminology: recreational trails, hard surface recreational trails, concrete versus asphalt. Let's just touch briefly. One slide here on funding goes all the way back to 1956. Federal Highway Act and the Highway Trust Fund had trails within that program. 68 National Trails, 76 the Rails to Trails grant program. We started to see the demise of some of the rural railroads. The Staggers Act, the ICE-T Act, 98, the T21, surface transportation block grants. You know, you need to explore all types of trail resources as you plan. And oftentimes, I'm going to touch on this in the next slide, oftentimes trail ideas are moved forward by special interest groups within a community. We do find more designers, more engineers who are arbitrarily including them within their design packages, but a good grassroots effort of community activists really is one of your best ways to get trails done. So the trail guide talks a little bit about that, and it walks you through, you know, planning as an initial step, funding. Of course, there's always going to be an environmental impact review. There probably is going to be some land acquisition that has to take place. Then comes engineering, design and contract, construction, and then your final obligation is how do you maintain it. And here is where, if you're taking a look at different paving materials and you look at concrete, on the maintenance side, the concrete will really shine because it's a long-term paving material that, of course, does not require some of the ongoing maintenance that other paving materials do require. But we put this in here because there is a systematic approach to developing trails, and we want you to be aware of that, that, you know, you don't hire engineering before you maybe, you know, get your planning done of where the route will be for the trail. Follow these things in order to develop a successful trail program. Now, let's talk about definition too. We want to break this down into kind of 6 different trail types. So as we start to discuss trails, we have a good understanding of what type of trail pathway we're going to be looking at. So in the guide, we break this down, and if you look at the graphics here, we have 6 different trail conditions, and we give them names. You know, the rail trail is number 1, and of course that oftentimes goes on abandoned railroad bed and right of way. You got your greenway trail, which will follow, you know, a park trail, maybe an existing park trail, or even go through wetlands. And you're going to see a case study towards the end of a trail system that incorporated even some pervious concrete because it went through a wetland area in Kentucky. The circumventual trail, lake trail or pond trail, a very popular trail when people want to ride their bikes, push baby strollers, skateboard around a body of water, a lake or a pond. I think everyone is aware of a lot of lakes around their areas that may have developing trail systems. Maybe it's partially done, maybe it's planned. Not far from where I'm at, there's one being planned right now that's about half done, and they're looking at ways to complete the loop around the lake. The urban side path will follow in the right of way a lot of times of the existing urban roadway. This may involve buying some right of way from existing owners. So that would be one of the things that you need to consider if you're looking at the urban side path, or see what's excuse me, designated for right of way. In the same vein, we have the rural side path, same type of thing, oftentimes built in the right of way. And as you can see, you know, follows the terrain. Not a lot is often done to, you know, grade these things like you would grade a roadway that's next to that on the left, but just following the natural terrain to build that pathway in that right of way. And then one of the most popular ones that I like is, and they're usually quite easy to work with, and that's where people have utility corridors. The highline poles, the different right-of-way things that are not going to be built on. And, you know, it's fairly straightforward to get an easement to go through there and put that that trail in there. And, you know, if they need to get in there and excavate out or dig out and remove part of the trail for maintenance, whatever it be, again, fairly straightforward to take out part of a trail, do the work that needs to be done, put the trail back in. So those are our 6 different trail types as we move forward. We've been asked many times, what is some good reasons to use concrete? And the best example I can show you is this trail pictures of this trail that are in southeastern South Dakota. You know, we look at the left-hand side and we talk about durability, competitiveness, when you get the design right, the ease of construction, the minimal maintenance, no steel is required. We're paving directly on uniform subgrade. If we run life cycle values, concrete will always come out on top, and then longevity. But if you look at the pictures of this trail system that's built in southeastern South Dakota, we talk about uniform subgrade for concrete paving. This is an area where there's a lot of this red rock near the surface there in southeastern South Dakota. And, you know, what would be more uniform in a base than that red rock? It's not going to go anywhere. And as the engineer who has been involved in some of our webinars has made the comment, how would you build this any other way? You know, how would you attempt to try and build this with a material that you had to place and roll into place? It can't be done. Here we can simply, you know, high pressure wash this rock off. We hammer drill the stakes in, we put the formwork on, and we pump the concrete in, and we've got a trail. And as she said, we had to be a little concerned about our joint layout, because as we've got these big ledges here in the rock, we want to make sure we had a joint close to that, and we maybe would address that differently. But what other material would you use to build a trail like this other than concrete? Here's another good example for building concrete, and we get a good visual on these pavement condition index photos of a trail built in 1988. And using the PCI on there, it's 90% good, 10% fair. In the third row, coming from the bottom up, we've got a trail built in 98, rated 95% good and 5% fair. One built in 2008, 99% good, 1% fair. And then, of course, in this example, a trail built in 2018, which is new construction. How many projects in trail projects and slab on grades, if you use other material, that you could have built a trail in 1988 and still have it be in 90% good, 10% fair condition? I want you to remember that as we move into a couple slides here. We talk about what Matt Mahalovic is doing down in Fayetteville, Arkansas, as he is removing all of the asphalt trails he built in years past and replacing them with concrete trails. Some of the other things that we bring forth in this guide, we talk about cross slope, longitudinal profile, what is the path the trail is going to take, clear zone, the separation of the trail from natural and artificial structures, trail crossings of roadways. We touch on concrete overlays of existing asphalt trails. Has been done very successfully. You've heard about overlays in general of streets and local roads, parking lots, highway systems. Yes, they've been done where existing asphalt trails have been left in place and overlaid with concrete directly on top of that trail. Saves you a lot of time, labor, and the headache of trying to remove and stockpile that asphalt material in some other place. We touch on subgrade preparation, where fiber reinforcement may be required, particularly on unsupported subgrade areas, edge details and drainage, paving details of structures, bridges, and culverts, retaining walls and next to trails, and planning for construction, identifying general corridors or other options. And we put a lot of details and pictures in the guide to explain all those conditions. I want to get into the trail design parameters. And when I get into this, you're going to see how it's a very simple, straightforward methodology based on industry documentation on thickness and trail width and subgrade soil support, how we roll this all into existing ACI documents and how we determine what these thicknesses should be. So within the trail guide, we have this chart, and we start to define what type of trail width you would use in a particular application. So for example, we're going to focus in the trail guide on the most common trail widths, which are 8s, 10s, and 12s. And you see that we have 10 highlighted there because 10, if we surveyed all trails that are built, we'd find that a 10-foot trail predominantly is the trail that's built in most applications. We see a few that go to 12, and occasionally you'll find a 14-foot trail, but not very often. When you get into a 14-foot trail, we've got another construction consideration that comes in, is that oftentimes we'll need a longitudinal joint, and longitudinal joints, if we can avoid them in hard surface trails, is something that we want to do. So we look at 8-foot trails. They're typically going to be neighborhood connector trails. So if you've got a development that you want to put a connector, put a trail within a development to connect it to a larger municipal trail, an 8-foot one is one that's used a lot. And so some of the requirements or some of the things that to consider, it's low bicycle traffic. So it's probably going to be an occasional bicycle, but it's probably going to be more of skateboarders, inline skaters, baby strollers, things like that. It will have that occasional pedestrian use of the walkers and the joggers. And we're going to say that no regular maintenance vehicles are going to go on there. And we classify a regular maintenance vehicle as something that's got some weight to it, maybe a pickup and snowblade. That maybe is probably not going to go on that trail, but maybe an ATV with a snowblade or a sweeper will go on that trail. And then as we get into the next slide, you'll see the thickness comparison, and that starts to make sense on this determination of how that's going to be used. 10-foot trails allow for two-way bicycle traffic, and a maintenance vehicle can go on that, something like a pickup truck, a skid steer loader, things like that. In the 12 to 14-foot trails, and I'll go back and say 12 is the most popular, 14 on rare occasions, they're going to be a higher capacity trail. They will allow for maintenance vehicles to go on them because there'll be a thicker design. They do allow for bicycle passing use. So passing in the same lane while allowing room for oncoming traffic. And they're going to be a high volume trail, something that's 300 in the peak hours, and we'll have more use on it. Probably, those trails that are frequented by maybe a lake or a place that is a normal gathering place for people, and then they'll use the trail while they're there. We use this soil support value for determining, again, the thickness of the trail. And many of you have seen this. It comes right out of ACI 330. And so we're looking at 3 different soil support levels: low, medium, and high. We define those over here on the left-hand side, wording right out of ACI 330. And then the comparative K value or CBR value, depending on which you use, that is associated with those types of soils. And then we start to boil this down, and we look at trail thicknesses based on the width and the soil support, again, all in the guide. If we have a trail less than 10 feet, so those 8-foot wide trails, we have high soil support. Coming over here on the right-hand side, and we're saying, listen, this is a 4-inch trail. Medium soil support, it's a 5-inch trail, thick trail, and low soil support, it's a 5.5-inch thick trail. If it's 10 foot or greater, so that 10 and 12, we're coming over here on the high at 5, medium at 5.5, and low at 6. Now, look at this and start to crunch these numbers. We're talking about an 8-foot wide trail with pretty decent soil is 4 inches thick. We're looking at a 10-foot wide trail that has pretty good soil support at 5. And if you're into a 12-foot wide trail, you're going to be 5 or 6. So when you start to look at the numbers, there is that correlation of width to thicknesses here. Half of 8 is 4, half of 10 is 5. It becomes a very straightforward methodology for understanding what potentially will be the thickness of the trail that you're proposing. I've captured that in one sheet. So as you download this, if you want to print this off one sheet, put the trail widths over here on the left-hand side, where they're used, and then the trail thicknesses, the concrete thicknesses over here on the right-hand side. And this becomes what I call our trail thickness cheat sheet, that if you wanted to print this off and have this handy, it's a quick reference sheet for you. Now, let's move in to talk about what Matt Mahalovic has done down in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Fayetteville has a mature trail program, goes back to 2005. They do so much trail work down there that they have a trails coordinator within the Department of Transportation, and Matt is that guy. In Fayetteville, they have 46.5 miles of trails that are planned or under construction. They run the trail construction crew with 9 members of city within the transportation division, and it's dedicated to building just trails. Every photo I show you is going to be of building concrete trails, because you are encouraged to call Matt if you'd like, and he will tell you that they are taking out their asphalt trails that they built back in 2005, so they're 15 years old, and they're replacing them with concrete, because as he put it to me, he says, maintenance on the asphalt trails, we're just killing our budgets for building new trails. If we build them once in concrete, we're done with them for at least 20 years. We don't have to go back and dedicate any type of maintenance to them. They get $1.5 million in sales tax revenue per year. And in 2006 and 2019, they did do bond issues because they had some trails that included structures and underpasses, and a longer trail system of 6.9 miles in trails in 2019. But Matt moves forward with a plan, and I just want to give you some examples of how you plan and lay out your trail system. That's here in just a couple of sheets. But the point I wanted to bring out in this slide is that we oftentimes hear pushback of, well, I don't want that trail across my property, and or you're going to put the trail there, and it's going to cost you so much money to buy the easements. Matt says, here's the benefit of a mature trail program. He said, when we built the Skull Creek Trail, over 65% of the easements were donated. Now, I bring that to your attention for those who say we're going to have an obstacle getting a trail here. And I'll tell you, from a mature trail metropolitan area, if you have a home in Des Moines, Iowa, or Ankeny, or Altoona, or Pleasant Hill, or Waukee, or anything surrounding, and it backs up to a trail, your house will bring a premium. Because as we go back to earlier in the slides, people are expecting that type of utility enhancement when they move into a community. So when you hear the reasons why you can't put a trail somewhere, understand that once the trail system is in progress, people start to see the advantage of it. And I hope you will see what Matt saw down there in Fayetteville, that over 65% of the easements didn't have to be bought. They were donated. They said, we want that trail on our property. He moves forward with a good set of plans that they developed through the transportation department. These would be typical of what you would design. They use a 3,500 PSI concrete in Fayetteville, which is a very reasonable concrete in that part of the country. They don't have some of the freeze thaw issues that we would have up further north here. But what I like about his plans is he lays out and tells you what is a good cross slope on the trail for good drainage. He talks about here what the finish they expect to do. It's a medium broom finish. That comes from years of feedback from people who are pushing baby strollers, bicycles, joggers, skaters, of that broom non-slip finish. Also, it goes without saying is that all these trails are designed with just transverse control joints cut into them. There are no longitudinal cracks in these longitudinal joints. And I'm going to show you at the end here what can happen if you have longitudinal joints in a trail and the maintenance that may come involved in it. They've taken great pains to do grade separation and crossings going underneath bridges. These are some of the trails that they built that they needed bond issues on because they were more than what the $1.5 million in the tax funding would do every year. But they have a very mature trail system that is now all done in concrete down there in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'd encourage you, if you want to talk to Matt, give him a call, tell him that we met via webinar. I had Matt featured on one of the national webinars a year ago, and he spoke to a national audience about their concrete trail development in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Also, you may see DOT types of funding come out with the plans and specifications. We have a mature trail program within the state of Iowa. I think you do in Illinois also. The DOT has plans and specifications right within their specs for roadways. And I think what you're seeing across the upper Midwest in different places is that when roadways are developed or improved, that there is a provision for trails to be built alongside those roadways. They just blend them right into that same package. That's a pretty easy and simple way to get a trail system built when you incorporate it within an existing project or trail roadway project. This one again in Dyersville, again, this is a multi-phased project, but they lay it all out. Everybody gets a good idea of where the trail is going to go, where it'll terminate, what time of the challenges, where bridges will be built. And so communicating this to the public as you move your trail program forward is essential. Get public buy-in on these as you plan your trail program. What I want to show you quickly here is some pretty typical cross sections on this trail and how they relate back to even what's in that guide. If we look at the width of this trail, this is a 12-foot wide trail. If you look down here, we have 6 inches of paving specified. So that falls into that 12-foot wide trail, 6 inches of paving. This is would be maybe a fill site, and they're showing the slope away from the trail. And of course, we see once again, this 1.5% cross slope in the trail section. If we had parts of this trail that are in cut sections, the details may look like this, but a lot of the specifications remain the same, but we show the slopes away from the trail and the shallow ditches that are created that are in good design practice to come off the trail in those cut sections to provide drainage, but not too deep of a ditch where it would cause a hazard if someone would run off that trail with a bicycle, a baby carriage, whatever it may be. Good details. I have my phone on do not disturb and it's still ringing. Wow. I don't know what happened. If you look at the slide that we have up there now, we show a cross section. This is not a very good one. It'll come through better on a printout of the slides, but we have a trail section along with a roadway section, or it could be a parking section and then drainage away. So once again, just some examples of trail section slides. Let's move into construction and talk about different ways trails are constructed. And I want to point you out to. I can't cut you off for some reason. I'm on a webinar right now. Oh, Jerry, yeah, you need to hang up. I need to call you back. Thanks. Now I got him cut off. I'm sorry about that. Trail construction has evolved. As we look at the top 2 pictures here, we see a slip form pavers that have been developed by contractors and pulled behind skid steer loaders. And these are homemade slip form pavers. Let's jump up one evolution here to a dedicated trail paver that was built by a municipality to pave their own trail system. And this is kind of a neat deal, but it is a 1 width trail and a 1 thickness trail, and built by public works people at a very reasonable cost to build their own. The power buggies are used to transport material to remote trails. We see the commercial type of equipment for slip-form paving in the lower picture here. And then even in some cases, we see form trails. I don't have a picture of form trails here, but we do show slip forms. And then the most common type of saw that's used to cut the joints early on is the early entry types of saws, cut these transverse joints, and they give us the least amount of a bump in the trail. They give us the smoothest amount of ride. Some may say, well, we're going to tool those joints. If you do tool them, you need to take great care that you don't create a lot of bumps. So saw cutting them is the best way to do it. Here are some of the things that the guide covers in construction. It's concrete mixes, delivery systems, whether it's fixed form paving or slip form paving, or other specialized types of paving, the box pavers, dedicated trail pavers. Equipment paths need to be defined during paving if we need to get equipment to the trail that's not driven on the trail. All these things need to be talked about. The most common finish is once it's placed, you give it maybe a bull float if you need to level something out, and then a surface broom or a burlap drag. Smoothness is talked about as what is determined to be the correct smoothness to for aesthetics, for walking rideability, but also for having good traction on the trail. Curing is talked about, construction and isolation joints, where to use those, and if you elect to use joint sealant, and most of these trail systems do not have seal joints because they're cut with the early entry saws. And then we finish it up with concrete trail maintenance section and what to do if you've got things that happen in your trail. Things like on the upper right-hand side here where you may have some faulting, because that would be just a contraction joint and you had a loss of support, how to fix a faulting between panels. And then that problematic longitudinal crack, if that should occur. And again, that's only going to occur if you go beyond 12 feet, because we've really looked at it and put the design together that these panels are cut into square panels. So a 12-foot wide trail will be cut into 12 by 12 panels, 10s, 10 by 10, 8s, 8 by 8s. And then other types of repairs that may happen, that can happen down the road. Then we talk about distress levels and repairs. We give you talk about these in more detail with more pictures and give you the repair option that should be done. And we have a section in there that does cover concrete overlay on asphalt trails. And this has been done successfully on a number of projects. And we look at the evaluation of the existing asphalt condition it's in and the path forward to an overlay on that section. Now, I want to wrap this up with some case studies, and I want to show you just 4 case studies. They're all kind of different. They all accomplish different things. They were all done a little differently. So let's jump into this and look at this Dam West subdivision in Aurora, Colorado. And in the early days, in 1991, this is really what we would call today just a big sidewalk. But in 91, it was called a trail. That was before we evolved this into saying, no, trails are bigger than 6 foot. They're, we really need to be 8 foot wide to call it a trail. And so we have a trail here that's about 5 foot wide. And it took a few years to replace the asphalt trail with concrete. They took it all out and did a replacement of it in this subdivision back in 97 with concrete. Let's jump forward and look at the evolution of this. It's the Sauk River Trail in Swan Lake, Iowa. They did a pickup and a recycling of the asphalt and used it as base before they put down the concrete trail. So they had the asphalt trail there, it deteriorated. Rather than overlay it back during the time that this was done, the overlays of asphalt trails was not as well known. And so at that time, they picked it up and reused that asphalt trail as base for the concrete. The Legacy Trail in Lexington, Kentucky is 8 miles of plain concrete and 4 miles of pervious concrete. And as we visited with the person who headed this up, he said, we needed a mix of fixes. We could not just arbitrarily use one type of trail construction because we had 4 miles that went through a wetland area, and we needed something that would allow the water to drain through. So we used a combination of both plain concrete and 4 miles of pervious concrete in this particular trail. And then we have the Parklands of Floyd trails, Jefferson County. That's 8 miles of conventional concrete trail in a floodplain. Now, floodplain is different than an area that floods a lot like the pervious section did in the previous case study, but it was a high potential for flooding. And of course, the asphalt, the worst enemies of asphalt is water. And so they use the concrete in there in this floodplain without any problem. When it does occasionally flood, water runs up on the concrete, runs off, and they remain in good shape. Now, there are additional case studies that I would point you to, and we have a website called concretetracker.org. And if you'd like to pull into concretetracker.org, you can take a look at search trails, and you can look at different case studies of trails on concretetracker.org. If you would like to go direct and get a download copy of the Guide to Concrete Trails, you can go to the rmcfoundation.org concrete applications section of their website, and there are a number of different download options. If you want a very high quality copy that can be used for printing, you can do that. If you want just a copy to read, you can pick that option to download it. And as I mentioned, printed copies of the guide are also available. Just talk to Jim, and we'll make sure that you get copies, printed copies, if you'd like to have a printed copy of the guide. I want to just end this with another website called paveahead.com. It's a concrete pavement design center. If you have any concrete project, be it mainline paving, overlay, streets and local roads, trails, you can get assistance. This is the newest design software program that's out there on the market today. It's the most concise, it's the most correct. And I say correct, and I'll say this, if you read Concrete in Focus, we are going to have an article coming out next month about those that are using outdated design programs for their concrete designs, and point them to Concrete Pavement Design Center and encourage them to go in there, because as Jim will tell you, with being in this business as long as we've both been, material changes, our knowledge base changes, and this is the most up-to-date design center that you can find for any type of slab on grade paving design. It's at paveahead.com and Concrete Pavement Design Center. So Jim, I'm done with what I was going to do here, and we're ready for some questions if you are.
Absolutely, John. Thank you. What a great presentation. And we do have one question here. It says, is 1.5 times the path width a good way to determine the transverse joint spacing?
That's a very good question. That was the old methodology, that you could go 1.5 times the width or the length on the transverse spacing. If you will look at the current issue of ACI 330, which we pull a lot of this information from, they have now changed that to 1.25 instead of 1.5. And so I would say that yes, 1.5 was correct. We've updated, we've become a little more conservative and said you can go 1.25, but in the guide, we talk about concrete likes square panels. So if it's 8 foot wide, you're 8 foot long. If it's 10 foot wide, you're 10 foot long. If you're 12 foot wide, you're 12 foot long. But if you needed to vary from that, the safe range, according to industry documents today, would be 1.25.
All right, thank you. We have another question. Reinforcement. What about fiber reinforcement in the concrete trail? They're asking steel or synthetic.
Well, the design guide is put together with rock, water, sand, and cement. And our position has always been if you add anything to that, there should be a reason for it. So to arbitrarily add anything to rock, water, sand, and cement, there should be a reason for doing that. And yeah, there probably is reason in some applications and in some conditions to add fiber reinforcing or fibers to the mix, but to just arbitrarily say you should put fiber in the mix, no, it's designed to use those 4 ingredients, and if you add anything to it, there should be a reason.
Well, thank you. And I might just add to that whether you're dealing with fast drying and shrinkage, you might want to use a microfiber. If you're looking for some conditions that want to give you some assurance in your strength and flexural strength, you might use a macro fiber. But talk to your local producer. They would have all the expertise to help guide you in that. And as you pointed out, it's not the initial design, it's an adder. And there are certain cases where that's helpful. Okay, I think we have a couple more questions have come up here. Okay, the person that asked the question about reinforcement said that they disagree. The reason would be reinforcement or prevent cracking or hold cracking tight. The joint, well, I'll let you answer that, John. The joint spacing kind of solves that.
It really does. We're taking a conservative approach to joint spacing in square panels. And, we talked about a uniform subgrade. So if we have, we've done our due diligence, we have the uniform subgrade, and we're cutting into square panels. We've done everything up front to ensure that we don't have the random cracking. Now, once again, I'll say if there is a site condition that you can't fix or a reason to add the fibers, certainly do that. But I will stand on my rock, water, sand, and cement. Anything you add to it, there needs to be a reason for it.
Yeah, some people might think of it as added insurance. So if you have the funds to do it, it's not a bad thing for it. It might be a little extra, but if that gives you peace of mind, that's worth a little something extra as well. One of the other things that I've recognized in our local bike trails is the whole consideration of safety. And the asphalt trails that I've seen have become a safety hazard. As you pointed out with your surfaces, with the concrete, that's something you avoid. And also, John, you want to speak to low carbon embodied concrete? Because I know these companies might want to, or communities, earn LEEDs points, environmental designs and things like that. And we have all kinds of mixes that help to do that.
Well, we do, and I'm not an expert in that subject. That is really something that our environmental team addresses for us. But it is a very hot topic right now in some parts of the United States. If I'm working on the West Coast and in San Francisco, it's almost in every specification. If you're in Chicago, it might be in every specification. But if you're in other parts of Illinois, it may not be a consideration. So the industry is really being proactive on doing a number of things, and we've seen the limestone replacement in cement mixes, things like that, and all these things play together. So there's many arms to this sustainability answer, and someone better versed in those things than me can address those, but I can tell you that it's front and center for the industry because of we oftentimes get pointed to as being big culprits.
Exactly, and we are promoting sustainability in Illinois, and I know there's credits coming, so it kind of plays into your funding portion if you're looking for those kinds of things. Are there any other questions for John? I don't see any. We've kept within our hour. I just want to say that Illinois Ready Mix Concrete Association, in concert with our producer members, is willing to come to your community, talk to your civil engineers, talk to your city councils, give you a free assistance in design. John will work with us on that as well. And we want to help you promote the best product for the best trail. It really beautifies the area. It's very functional, and it will last and last. So hope we see a lot of trails in Illinois between now and another year, and get back to John and say, boy, this was great. So John, did you have any other closing comments? We're right here at the end of our webinar. Perfect timing.
Jim, once again, I'll thank you for asking me to be involved in this. I'm not covering Illinois on a regular basis, but lots of good friends over there, and it's kind of great to be home. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate the presentation. Thank you, everyone. Please be reminded that you can go to our website and see all of our webinars and replay them. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week. Thank you. Bye-bye.